Well, hello, everybody. We hope that you're doing very well today. We hope that you have fine weather where you are, at the very least, that you have some weather where you are. Today, we are here to talk to you about a little story that we started back in March, and that is the story of the Israeli election. So, if you may remember, back in March, we discussed a meltdown, as it were, in Israel's parliament, which is known as the Knesset. And late last year, this happened over a budget approval impasse, and this led to an unprecedented fourth election in 2 years in Israel. Then you may remember we talked in April about how the election ended clear as mud on a dark night, with both the previous ruling Likud party, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, and the anti-Netanyahu coalition, led by Yair Lapid, and the Yesh Atid party, both of which fell less than 10 seats short of the 61 needed for a majority in the 120-seat Knesset. Now, if you were paying really close attention, you may also remember that this made potential kingmakers of the unaffiliated Yamina party, led by Netanyahu ally, or former Netanyahu ally, I should say, Naftali Bennett. And there was also the United Arab List, a Palestinian minority party, led by Mansour Abbas. Now, this led Netanyahu and Lapid to both meet with President Reuven Rivlin on April 4th to seek a mandate to form the government. Now, following the tradition of most British system-based democracies, the incumbent, Netanyahu, was given the mandate and sent forth to try and make enough friends to form a coalition. Now, this set off speculation that Israel would see yet another minority Netanyahu government, which would likely lead into a fifth election to take place later this year. However, Netanyahu failed to make friends rather spectacularly, and at the end of his month-long quest, he'd still failed to kiss a prince, so President Rivlin gave the mandate to Lapid on May 4th so he could try. Now, on May 9th, it was announced that coalition talks had made great progress between the anti-Netanyahu bloc, Yamina, and the United Arab List. And then on May 10th, it was announced that Yamina and the United Arab List had abandoned the talks. In late May, Lapid announced that the anti-Netanyahu bloc had agreed to a coalition to form a government, and Yamina and the United Arab List still remained unaffiliated, which left the prospect of a minority government on the table and meant the whole situation was basically back where it started. On May 30th, Yair Lapid and Naftali Bennett announced in a press conference that Yamina would join the anti-Netanyahu coalition, and on June 2nd, Mansour Abbas signed a coalition agreement with Lapid and Bennett that officially brought the United Arab List into the government. Now, Lapid informed President Rivlin the same day that he could form a majority government, thus ending 12 years of Netanyahu rule. And the new government was sworn in on June 13th with Naftali Bennett as prime minister. The role of alternate prime minister was also created and filled by Yair Lapid. Now, Lapid will take control of the government on August 27th, 2023, at the halfway mark of the new government's four-year mandate. On that day, Bennett will also take the role of the alternate. Also on June 2nd was the Israeli presidential election. Now, presidential elections are held in Israel, and they're indirect, as only members of the Knesset vote on the president. And it's because the president's role is largely ceremonial and mostly consists of mediating election outcomes, much as President Rivlin did. Now, the president serves a single 7-year term, and Isaac Herzog was elected with 87 votes, which is the largest majority in history, and he will serve as president until 2028, and he will actually be sworn in on July 9th. So, with the president and parliamentary elections settled and Israel moving into a new era of governance, does this offer hope for a resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the apartheid and occupation of Palestine by Israel? Short answer, no. Long answer, nope. Naftali Bennett is, in fact, a devoted racist who has bragged openly about how he's killed Palestinians and enjoyed doing so, and how he hopes to annex Palestinian lands and eradicate Palestinian citizens. Real champion there, as you can tell. Now, Yair Lapid could be counted as less topically genocidal, but while he champions the two-state solution, he has himself stated the ideal version of Israel for him is one with no Palestinians, which would be disturbing enough without his coalition partner in a situation of horrific irony, parroting the rhetoric of a 1940s mustache man who said the same thing about him. Now, Lapid has also stated his support for the total annexation of the Golan Heights and Jerusalem. Unfortunately, this continued imperialism, and in the case of some people, bloodlust, sponsored by Western powers, seems to really preclude any kind of proper solution. But as always, do stay tuned to Election Detection for updates as they develop. So that brings an end to our Israel saga for at least the time being, but it'll be
For
interesting to see
now.
how long it really holds.
Yes, it's
So I suppose the
yeah.
major question here is obviously with the West sort of becoming more aware of the situation in Palestine, or at least no longer deliberately ignoring it as they did for so long. It'll be definitely sort of a, I don't want to say a growing issue, as it's been a big issue for, decades now, but definitely a bigger issue on the world stage, being watched much more closely as it should have been all this time. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next 4 years, especially where you have for the next 2 years a lunatic who's determined to further total annexation and eradication. If only there was a term for that. What's the word for that?
Start with an F. Start with an F.
I was going to say the one that starts with G.
That
That
too.
one, that one, that one. Yeah,
One
and
generally leads to the other.
yeah, this is true. This is true. And then going forward, in 2 years' time, you then have someone who is, a self-professed fan of the two-state solution, but how much is he really a self-professed fan of the two-state solution? Of, oh, we're gonna have two equal states, or of, hey, we're gonna have our state, and then you can have the bad bit.
Yeah. You could almost say it was behind closed doors, but the door got left open on the way
Yeah, pretty much. That's pretty much what it feels like. So
in. Yeah.
basically, things are as they always were, which is
Tense.
not fortunate. But just the change in leadership will hopefully bring on some changes to the better. But put simply, I don't hold out much hope.
No.
Well, that's about all that we've got today for our little update on Israel. So we'll talk to you all in the coming few days.
Yes. Thanks for listening.